The head of the state's biggest school district has been in the news quite a bit recently. Winston Brooks hosted educators from around the country last week at the Great City Schools Conference, but he also recently sent an email to teachers begging them not to quit. And this week, two controversial tweets. He has battled low approval ratings and taken on state officials over a new teacher evaluation system. So what is his vision for improving Albuquerque schools? Superintendent Winston Brooks, thanks for coming in and spend some time with us. A lot of things to talk about. Let's get right to it. You just hosted a conference, the Great City Schools Conference here in Albuquerque, superintendents from all over the country. I got a chance to attend pretty much most of every day of it, and I gleaned so many interesting things. I think most people would be surprised all the issues you have to wrestle with as superintendents. What did you come away with from that conference? What were some of the trends that you heard that are working for superintendents that you might have come away with thinking, I think APS might need to look at this?
Well, I think that's a great question. I guess one of the biggest takeaways I took away, not to answer your question, is that APS pulled this off.
Yeah.
Albuquerque pulled it off. This is one of the largest conferences that Albuquerque's had this year in 2013. And not only did we have superintendents from all over the country, but school board members and other staff members. The council is only one of very few organizations that have both superintendents and board members. So to have that focus, that joint focus on education of urban kids is a big deal. I think the conversation, maybe the most enjoyable session that I attended, was a conversation on racism. I thought Ogletree, Charles Ogletree, was phenomenal. I thought the way that we had like 400 or 500 people in there, I'm told, and I thought it was just a fabulous conversation. I guess the other takeaway is that, you know, sometimes we feel so isolated and alienated from everybody else, being in a state where we're 4 times larger than the next largest district. But to have people from San Francisco and Dallas and Boston and Miami-Dade County, have those people come and talk to us about the same kind of issues and challenges that we have here is kind of, I guess, misery in groups is kind of a good thing. But it was, I tell you, it was just fantastic. It's always great to be able to talk to your colleagues and know that the challenges we have here are not all that unique, that it's occurring all over the country.
That came across. I got that same sense that the issues were pretty much the same everywhere. But what also came across to me was I did not hear a lot of negativity. I did not hear a lot of crying about, oh, woe is us from Washington, D.C., or whatever the case may be. I heard a lot of positivity, actually, about the possibilities for teaching our kids in a different way to give them tools for a next generation in the next century. But what I also heard, which is interesting, was an emphasis on race, culture, and other things that the studies are showing are quite impactful on learning. Meaning if there are things about you, where you come from, where your people are from, where your traditions are from, folding those kind of things into a learning environment. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. That was a huge emphasis.
You know, Gene, you're very perceptive. I think what this conference does is it really forces you to take a deep dive into the issues. You know, we deal so much with the surface issues, whether it be teacher evaluation or mandatory retention and ending social promotion or whatever those things are that have been kind of the political landscape. This conference allows us to really take a deep dive into those issues. Things like, you know, ELL students and teachers that are ELL licensed and what kind of challenges that they have. Poverty, you know, isn't a deal breaker, but it certainly has an impact on a child's opportunity. When you have kids in our district who come to kindergarten, some only knowing 5 sight words and another who can almost read a novel, that gap, that opportunity gap that Secretary Duncan talks so much about is really, really critical. You know, I just think that that we have so much here that we've got to be thankful for. And the positivity, I think success breeds success. And I think what we're seeing in our large urban schools, I know what we're seeing, the data shows it, is that we are actually improving at a greater rate than our rural and suburban school district brothers and sisters. The gap closing is larger. It was all the wider to begin with. It's now it's smaller and closing at a more rapid rate. I just think you know, we educate those of us who are represented in those 65 largest school districts teach about 17% of the kids in America. And if we can start getting it right, I think a lot of things are going to go the right direction.
Sure. Part and parcel of that new style of looking holistically at entire families and situations and backgrounds to learn is family engagement. And I know APS has had a family engagement plan here for a little bit. Could you take us through that? Is it fully implemented at this point to your satisfaction? Is it something that at the beginning now you see some possibilities for, or would you rather scrap it, start over again? Where are we at in our family
We're
engagement?
definitely not going to scrap it. We're not certainly where we need to be. We obviously have some schools out of our 140 that do family engagement better than others. Sometimes I think you have to define what family engagement actually is.
Okay.
I know that family engagement, a lot of people say, well, that's being a PTA mom or dad and baking cookies and driving on field trips. Well, that is one way, but I have to tell you, about 2 years ago, I was at a conference in New York called NBC. It was actually sponsored by NBC. It was called NBC Education Nation. And I remember one young man who sat on the stage and he said, my mom works 3 jobs. She's a single mom. And when she deliberately sets her schedule up for those 3 jobs so that between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the evening, she's home with me. And she's sitting at the dining room table with me, kitchen table with me, helping me with my homework. That's family engagement. And that mother, single mom's not going to get a lot of attention for that, but that's what we need. We need moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and neighbors to sit down with their kids and actually give them some attention and help them and support them in what they're doing at school.
Cultural competency was part and parcel of that conversation during the conference and nationwide, of course. Again, another term that sometimes needs a little bit of explanation, like family engagement. What does that mean? Well, cultural competency to you, what does that mean to you, cultural competency, and how have we started using that here in Albuquerque? Are we appropriately using that term right now?
Yeah, we are actually using the term cultural proficiency, and we used the work, started about 2 or 3 years ago with a professor from Pepperdine, I believe, named Randall Lindsay. And it was the whole cultural proficiency issue. Because although race is a huge part of that cultural proficiency, we also have other challenges like able-bodied people and disabled-bodied people and heavy people and skinny people and all those kinds of things. And I even find myself sometimes, I was in Subway the other day in line, and I was behind a young man who was, I don't know what you call it, but his pants were way down on himself. And I without saying or knowing him or anything else, I was judging him, saying, how ridiculous is this, and so on and so forth. I was right behind him, and the mannerisms he had to the people who served him were unbelievably positive. And my view in just 3 or 4 minutes going through the subway line changed from a guy who's got his jeans down around his knees to some kid who's really, really smart, very, very respectful. And so that's cultural proficiency. I think, we've got to do a better job of judging, not judging people, and really trying to figure out what's in a person's inside.
Sure.
I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah. Teacher evaluations. Seems to be a bone of contention of some small sort here in New Mexico. Kidding, of course. What is it exactly about the evaluation process that PED has implemented that is giving our teacher corps such agita at this point? What is it specifically inside those requirements that you're hearing the commonality of problems that you're hearing from teachers?
Too much weight on student assessments.
Now, when you say too much, compared to the current issue, the current way we do it, compared to the national average,
No,
how
I
does
think
that
it's
fit?
I think nationally we're all in the same boat with this. No, I'd say from the way it was a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and quite frankly, I'm kind of an assessment proponent in some ways. I often liken it to the fact of a person who's diabetic needing to poke themselves 3 or 4 times a day to find out how they're doing, and then adjust their behavior based on what the results were, and that's really what assessments are designed to do. The part now is we've taken assessments not only in the state of New Mexico, in the United States, and we're using them for the wrong purposes. Assessments were always designed to determine where you're at today, what you've learned in a period of time, and then teachers are to make adjustments. It was for student individual growth. They were never designed to evaluate teachers. And now what we're doing is we're taking that and not just a data point, but the trend data on student growth, which I think is something we got to look at. But when you put 50% of that on the back of a teacher, and oftentimes we're measuring band directors based upon the performance of math and reading in a school, I think that gives people a lot of heartburn. You know, now we have finals, we have end-of-course exams, and although PED has said you don't have to do both, we do have to do end-of-course exams in about 27 of our subjects. Where PED is going to continue to build end-of-course exams, and so, you know, that's probably the wave of the new future, and we're going to end up stopping finals. One of the problems with end-of-course exams is that you give them about 6 weeks before the kid's ready to graduate. There's a lot of learning that can happen in those last 6 weeks.
right.
So I think it's the emphasis that's placed on testing, and I think the misuse of assessments that were designed for student growth, but now are being used to measure the effectiveness of a teacher.
Do I have it correct that you, meaning APS, had submitted some guidance and some possibilities for assessments, supplied that to PED with the hope, I'm going to imagine, that maybe something could have been met in the middle? What was different about APS's approach to assessments versus what came down from PED? And in fact, is there a place in the middle on this?
Right.
What are the differences?
We were recommending rather than 50% placed on assessments, 30%.
Okay.
And that was our first proposal. Our second proposal was to take it up to 35%. I happen to believe, and I think the board believes, that a greater value is teacher observations and principals being in the classroom. I don't think anybody.
Why is that better?
Well, people can learn how to work the system. So we have now, teachers have a matrix they have to follow. And even the worst teachers can memorize that matrix. And for that 45-minute session, the principals in there can mimic what that matrix is all about. But the minute the principal leaves, it goes back to status quo.
Sure.
So I would rather our principals be in the classrooms more, use professional judgment. You know, give us a matrix to use, but put more weight on principal observation than on student assessment.
What would be the outcomes if you had to take a guess of what you're proposing versus what PED is proposing? Does it all come out in the wash? At the end of the day, is it the same, or are you proposing that the system you're proposing would in fact have better results for students and for parents?
I think principals being in classrooms would have a greater impact on student achievement than giving them multiple tests. I think also, and we're really trying to talk to the PED about this, are multiple measures. Not all kids are good test takers. We have a large number of kids that are special ed that can do the coursework successfully, but given the pressure, I know of 2 twin autistic kids from La Cueva who passed all their coursework, but there's no way they can walk in and take an assessment and be successful.
Gotcha.
They're not going to do it. Their parents know they can't do it. We've got to have some alternative ways for some of our kids to be able to demonstrate competency other than filling in a bubble sheet.
Sure. You recently emailed teachers around the district asking them to hold tight and not think about leaving a profession that they love and that they've trained for, and that perhaps they should stay around and be part of the solution in the future. Some are choosing to leave, some are retiring, but there just seems to be a pretty good royal. Where do you come into this to either settle things, move things forward with your teacher corps? Was advising folks not to quit the right way to go, or is there another way to say that in the future, another way to go with that to get people to kind of rally around the cause here?
Well, I suspect there's lots of different ways to say it. That's what was in my heart at the minute that I wrote it. And I started these weekly emails that are unedited, directly from my heart. I've had tons of people offer, we need to help you, and you can phrase that better. I want to speak to my staff directly from me. So yeah, there's probably 100 different ways to be able to say it. That's what was on my mind that day. And it was primarily on my mind that day because the night before we were at Volcano Vista High School and a teacher stood up and she says, I'm going to quit. And I really didn't sleep well that night. And when I woke up the next morning and I was in the office and I wrote that email, that was still ringing loud in my ears. And so my response was, don't quit. We can't quit on our kids. we've got to continue doing the right thing. We've got to continue being positive. We've got to continue doing what we know what to do. We can't allow corporate reforms to interfere with what, so many of our teachers do so well. Everybody wants to pick on the 5% who aren't doing well. And that's a big number in APS. I mean, that's 350 teachers, 5%. But we have 8,600 teachers that are doing the right thing every day, and some of the most dedicated people I know. I often think, Gene, about recently all these things that have happened, whether it was a tornado in Oklahoma City or a shooting in Sandy Hook or something else, that these teachers are putting their lives on the line, literally. They're putting their careers on their line. They're abandoning, I don't mean that in a real negative way, but their families to work with their kids. And I just think teachers need a lot of support. Teaching is not a bad thing. I went into it 40 years ago thinking it was the most honorable profession in the world. And I still believe that. I still believe that, and I think most parents believe that they want their teachers. They love their teachers for the most part. Gallup has done a poll year after year after year, and parents continue to give their school an A or an A minus because they love their school. They know what's going on there. Now they'll give the district a D, but they'll give their school and their teachers a better grade. I just think we have to support our teachers.
Sure, absolutely. As we tape this late in the week, we're 2 tweets in, Superintendent, that for other ways to put it is not helpful to the situation. I think you might agree to that. Looking back on both those tweets, what's your sense of what happened there? Is there a plan for the future? Is Twitter for you? Or maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's not for everybody, as they say. Tell us about what happened there. What was the situation, starting with this latest tweet involving the KOAT reporter out in Moriarty?
Well, first of all, I'm a neophyte to the social media world, and that's probably not an excuse. Ignorance is, my dad used to say, ignorance is an excuse. And I have no excuses to make for this. I literally thought I was having a communication with a person. I've later learned that when you tweet back to somebody, it's going out to everybody who's following you.
Who did you think you were tweeting back to in that situation?
Lauren Zakalik with KOAT.
Okay.
She sent out a tweet saying she was in a live truck. Quite frankly, I read that so fast, I thought she said livestock truck in Moriarty, and it was freezing. And so I replied back, something, and then she was kind of keeping me up to speed about what was going through the meeting, and I also was, having other people tell me what was going on. It wasn't going all that well there, and so I think when the town hall was to end, they actually took a break and came back and answered some questions because I don't think PD was very good at that moment in answering the crowd's questions. And so when they took the break, I said, well, maybe Scandi, designate Scandera, was going out to the livestock truck. And then I followed that up with oink, oink, moo, moo. People will believe whatever they want to believe. All I can say today, and I said it yesterday all day, I'm sorry, it was inappropriate. No excuses. I mean, we got to try to move forward. We have 90,000 kids to educate in this district today, and that's going to be my focus.
How much responsibility do you feel you have to take on yourself to depoliticize education in our state right now? Things are very hot. It's become very politicized between the administration, yourself, there's ATF involved, meaning the Teachers Federation, the union. Do you have a personal responsibility to help de-escalate this? And if you do, what can you do to help depoliticize this situation?
Well, obviously I do. I'm smart enough to know that I'm a leader here in this community. And I've said publicly before, it would be far better if PED and APS could have a better working relationship. I don't deny that. I say that, though, I don't want people to think we've not tried. I've had lunch with Secretary Designate Scandera on 3 or 4 different occasions. We've talked via phone, we've talked via email, and I think there have been attempts on both sides. It's very hard, though, I will tell you, because again, I think I have 9,000 employees, 90,000 kids, and a whole bunch of parents who expect me to be the voice of APS. And just because I or the district or the board disagree with some of the reforms being proposed doesn't necessarily make me a bad person.
Sure.
I mean, this is America, and I do have the right to be able to speak out. This district for years, I think, went with, with all due respect to a lot of my predecessors, they certainly weren't as visible and as verbal as I am. When the board hired me 6 years ago, that's what they wanted. They wanted somebody who could be strong. And Gene, I have to say that, we've increased graduation rates from 50% to 70% in the last 5 years. We now have more kids involved in AP classes than in the history of this town. We have 13 out of our 17 high schools got an A last year. So we're making tremendous progress, and I'm just very sorry and quite frankly embarrassed that I have put a black eye on APS because of a stupid tweet that I made, and I'm seriously considering not tweeting, although I've received a lot of support. I guess that's what you call it. I'm also a human being, and I'm not as mean and awful as some people think I am. And again, I'm not making excuses, but I'm a better person than what I demonstrated a couple days ago. And so I'm sorry, and I'm a good Catholic boy. I think reconciliation is saying you're sorry and then going out and trying to do better, and that's what I'm going to try to do.
Did time to tell the troops to de-escalate a little bit? Perhaps the signs, perhaps the things like that we're seeing in the news now and again. Is there a way to tell the folks to just kind of simmer down a little bit, or?
Well, there probably is. The problem is, and the reason this is happening is that people don't feel like they've been listened to. And it's like the town hall.
And people get angry and they react.
People get very angry.
Sure.
And I have an obligation to try to calm the waters, but I also have an obligation to support the 7,000 employees, 14,000 employees, quite frankly, that work for me. I'm not going to blindly support them, but I think giving teachers a greater voice in their own profession is something that has to be listened to. You don't have to buy it, totally, but I think it's something we owe professionals the professional courtesy to sit down and listen to what they have to say. We have a group of teachers kind of split between La Cueva and El Dorado who have developed, I haven't seen it yet, but they've developed a peer review system that they want to propose to PED. I can't wait to get my hands on that. I hope that those teachers are listened to. I don't think that the APS board was listened to when we submitted not one waiver, but two. I think that we sometimes get ignored by PED, and that's hard to do when you educate 30% of all the kids in the state. I don't think we should be ignored. And I think that, again, I think people need to be listened to. I think that's what teachers are asking. And I don't think it's my responsibility to tell teachers, knock it off, when in fact they are angry. They are angry. And I have to also worry about teachers leaving the profession. I don't know where all these young, bright, highly qualified teachers are going to come from.
Right.
They make $30,000 a year, for God's sakes. They have pretty good benefits, but you can't raise a family on $30,000. And so I don't know where all these wonderful, great people are going to come from. And in particular, in the areas of STEM and science and technology and math and engineering, those folks are going out to the labs to work. They're not coming to work for APS. And so you have to worry. You have to worry about that a bit. And so I don't know. I mean, I certainly, and I said it, I think yesterday in a tweet, that we've got to focus on the positive.
Right.
And so I think that's the the plan of attack I'm going to take is, let's try to take the high road as much as possible and try to stay off the low road, including me.
Good enough there. Superintendent Brooks, thank you very much for spending some time with us. I know it's been a tough week, but I appreciate your forthrightness on these issues, very much so.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Come see us again.
All right, I will. Thank you so much.